I'm not going to start with any easy questions.
What would you do if you couldn't fail?
I was vulnerable in the sense of I was just who I was.
In my journey as an entrepreneur, I really found who I am as a human.
I was much more emotionally available to everyone because I was much more balanced.
Finding the grace and the humor in the balance of it all.
Whatever happens in the gut happens in the brain, and whatever happens in the brain happens in the gut.
Do you have a specific morning routine?
I was able to sort of reset my nervous system by getting involved with the cold.
Allow ourselves to have imperfection.
Absolutely had mentors, absolutely 100% had coaches.
A wake-up call to me that I could not try to be something I'm not.
Seeing results of just isolating the breathing was having these tremendous impacts on my physiology.
Work at a gratitude practice.
What the hell am I doing? Can I really do this? Is this really worth it?
90+% of the decisions that we make today actually stem from fear.
When was I proud of myself today?
I think for me, it's really inspiring people to step out. And you don't have to step all the way out.
Then there are these other moments of magic and joy.
If we can just push into discomfort, we actually find that on the other end, there's a lot of benefit.
What's your purpose?
Nothing starts without a plan. Nothing ever goes to plan.
I think we're going to see a new realm of healing that ultimately wasn't available to us.
If we can bring a practice into our lives that helps us be more vulnerable.
So much of entrepreneurship, I truly believe, to anybody on this call is grit.
I got involved with Wim. I just love the guy. He's just a great human. When people are on the path, they shine.
We so often convert things into flaws as opposed to strengths.
We all deserve to be happy, healthy, and strong.
I'm so thrilled that this content is getting out there, that you guys are promoting bold and vulnerable message and aspirations for people, because I hope that we can all really live that every day.
Hey, this is Jessica.
And Svetlana, and you're listening to the Bold and Vulnerable podcast,
Where we aim to inspire others to live authentically through sharing the bold and vulnerable stories of peak performers across a variety of industries. Today we have Zander Fryer on the call with us. Zander is a best-selling author, internationally renowned speaker, and world traveler. He's more than just a corporate dropout, though. After quitting his successful corporate career at age 27, Zander launched his company, Shit You Don't Learn in College, to inspire and empower entrepreneurs to build successful businesses while adding value to the world. His trainings impact over 50,000 people in 22 different countries and more than 300 organizations. He is a TEDx presenter, and you can catch his new TEDx talk titled, What Would You Do If You Couldn't Fail? At zanderfryer.com/TEDx. We are thrilled to have Zander on the call. So without further ado, here is our podcast recording with Zander Fryer. Enjoy. So Zander, what's up?
Jessica, how's it going?
Good. I've personally known Zander for, I think, like 7 or 8 years now. I don't even know how long it's been, to be honest, but it's about that much. And we met when we both lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we've just stayed connected. So welcome to our podcast, Bold and Vulnerable. So thanks for
Thanks for having me, guys.
We're excited. So we want to get right into it. With your TEDx talk that you just did, when was that?
It was back in February, so not too long ago, few weeks ago, 6 weeks ago.
6 weeks ago. That's awesome. Yeah, I was excited that it was already up online because I didn't know how quick they posted.
Yeah, I mean, it literally just got up this week. We haven't even told anybody about it, so I was surprised that you guys had already seen it.
Well, I didn't know it was up there, and then I knew that you had done it, and Svetlana was like, "Well, can we find it?" And I was like, "I don't think so." And then I just searched, and I was like, "Oh, well, there it is. I guess we can find it."
Yeah, I've literally only told a couple of friends and family about it. We haven't pushed it out to anybody yet, so it's still quiet. So you guys are hearing it here
We're
first.
Pushing it out. So we want to dive into it. So first thing with your TED Talk. So how did you pick your topic? And the title was "What Would You Do If You Couldn't Fail?" So how did you pick that out of probably all the things that you had floating up in your brain, and tell us about that process? I
mean, to be honest, there's a lot of things floating around in this brain, but for me, over the last probably 2.5 years of everything that I've done after quitting my corporate job starting my company, Shit You Don't Learn in College, building $1 million coaching business, best-selling book, all the things that you mentioned. Like one of the key principles that I've noticed that has allowed me to do everything that I've done, it's a very, very simple idea that most people don't really understand. And it's this idea that every decision that we make, literally every decision we make, and you guys heard this in the TED Talk, but our lives are really just a series of decisions. Like each decision kind of sends you down a different path. Every time you make a decision, it could send you one way or another. And it's just a series of all these decisions, really big ones or really small ones, or somewhere in the middle, that send us down a certain path. One of being incredibly fulfilled, happy, joyful, or one where you're left empty, hungry, frustrated, longing, right? And every single one of these decisions that I have made over years have led me down a certain path. But in the last 2.5 years, I made a very conscious effort that every time I made a decision, I made it a certain way. And that's really what's over the last 2 years has led me to a life that I honestly could not have ever imagined was actually possible. And basically what it is, and I share this in the TED Talk, is every decision that you make comes from either fear or purpose. And the more decisions that you actually make from a purposeful, intentional place, right? Some might call it intention. Some might call it making a decision from love, from purpose, from growth, all of those things, right? It's going to be different verbiage for different people, but the contrast is the other way of making a decision is from a place of fear. Right. And the truth is 90+% of the decisions that we make today actually stem from fear. They stem from a subconscious part of our brain, the amygdala part of our brain, that's literally wired to keep us alive as cavemen, but it's not necessary anymore. And as soon as I made the conscious decision to make more of my decisions from a place of purpose and less from fear, literally everything in my like all the things in my life that I actually wanted just started to come true. All the excuses fell away, and all the fulfillment, all the success, all the money, all the travel, all the, everything that I could have ever wanted just came to be, simply because I made a decision to make all my decisions from purpose. So that's basically where this whole TED Talk came from. That was the core of everything that's allowed me to be successful over the last 2 years.
That's amazing. So I know you mentioned fears.
Yeah.
You did mention this fear in your TED Talk, glossophobia, or the fear of public speaking.
Fear of public speaking. Yes.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people, especially people that are listeners to this show, probably have that fear. I think a lot of people have that fear.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to dive into that a little bit. Did you get nervous before your TED? Would be the first question. And the second part of that question would be, how did you prep or study or prepare? Or do you have any like life hacks to kind of beating that type of a fear?
Absolutely. So, when it comes to public speaking, so did I get nervous? The answer is yes. Of course I got nervous, right? Like, I don't care how many talks you've done. I've spoken in front of 2,000-3,000 people. I've, even in this last year alone, I've probably done, a couple dozen talks in front of hundreds or, dozens of people, right? On a weekly basis, I'm literally speaking to a group, my coaching clients, anywhere between, 15 to 20, right? So I'm constantly doing public speaking. But one of the things that I've actually noticed, and I've had a lot of conversations around this, is you don't actually have a fear of public speaking. It's really interesting. It's actually an intimidation of others. And so what happens if you've ever thought about it, if you were to speak in front of a group that you do not think have a superior quality to you in any way, like if I were to go speak in front of a bunch of like fifth graders or something, and I don't really care what they think, I'm actually not going to be nervous, right? But what happens is, for most people, when it comes to public speaking, it's actually an internal view of themselves, a lack of self-worth around themselves, and somebody in the audience they perceive as higher than them, above them. And because of that, you have a desire to prove yourself to them. And that's actually what creates this fear of, what if I don't appear good enough to them? What if I don't appear, what if I don't appear to carry myself well or articulate well? Or what if I don't get this message off right? Or what if I mess up and then they don't like me, right? And it comes down to this base level fear of as ancient man, as ancient caveman, right? Like, community, right? Community, being amongst people that liked you meant survival. So if this person doesn't like me, they'll kick me out of the clan or whatever. I don't know what's actually going on in our brains. But so it's really interesting when you understand what the fear of public speaking actually is. It's actually an intimidation of somebody else in the audience. That's why, like, you've probably heard, like, the quote unquote life hack or speaking hack, like, imagine everybody naked, right? What does that do? That puts them down a level on the playing field, right? So you're just kind of laughing about it rather than actually afraid of who's in the audience. For me, what I actually do, one of the things that I do, there's two things that I suggest to anybody who has, like, a fear of public speaking that wants to go speak more. First of all, just get practice, right? That's probably one of the best things, is just go get practice so that it's not an unknown. You're not uncomfortable with it. Whatever we're unfamiliar with, we're very uncomfortable with. If you just go make it familiar, just go do it a couple of times, go to Toastmasters, go to improv or something like that. Just go do some speaking. It starts to become much more comfortable. But the real two, that's kind of the prerequisite. The real two, number one, is what I actually call, like, connecting with the audience before you actually get on stage. So this is a very woo-woo way to do it, but it's basically a visualization and meditation where I'll sit down, I'll close my eyes, and I will visualize the audience. I will see the audience before I actually go up on stage. And I will envision every single one of them with just a light, like a spark in their chest. And I'll envision myself with my spark in my chest. And I'll envision, like, all of our sparks, like all the lights of everybody connecting. And I will literally envision myself, like, becoming friends with every single person in the audience, like them smiling, me smiling back at them, like us having a connection even before I go on stage. And then I'll remind myself, this isn't about you. It's about them. It's never about you. It never was, and it never will be. This audience needs to hear what you have to say. They showed up because they need you. And when you remind yourself of that, you're no longer intimidated by them. You just have a desire to go out there and serve. And so that's, like, my little, like, pre-speaking routine that I do every single time. The second thing that I suggest to anybody that has any form of, like, glossophobia or fear of public speaking is, if you haven't looked into EFT, like, just Google, I'm sure, what's his name? Brad Yates or something has some shit all over YouTube. Just search EFT public speaking fears. I'm sure you can find half a dozen different tapping things that could overcome whatever fears are coming up for you, for sure.
Did you practice with anyone or in front of anyone, like family members or anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I normally, sorry, go ahead.
I was just curious who you practiced in front of, and, like, what type of trust was there and feedback and things like that.
Yeah. So, normally when I do talks, I don't practice at all. I'll practice. I'll run through kind of the flow and everything like that. But obviously, being a TED Talk, it's like you want to hit it, right? You can't really just free flow it when you're doing a TED Talk. Like, you've got a set time limit. You got to make sure you're hitting every beat. You got to make sure the transitions are on point. Because this was something for us. It's like, I wasn't doing it for the 300 people in the audience. I was doing it for the 3 million that are going to watch it online. Right. So that's really what I was doing it for. So it's like, I had to hit every tonality. I had to hit every pitch. I had to hit every pause and every spacing that I wanted to hit to really have the impact. Because, one of the things that I tell people, it's one thing, a lot of people do a TED Talk because they have a message that they want to put out there. That's not a TED Talk. That's you just talking. A TED Talk is a message that is heard. There's a difference between talking and being heard, right? And this is something that I have to remind public speakers all the time. But so for me, like, I had to make sure that everything was done in a way that it would really connect the way that it needed to for us to take this viral. So because of that, I did a lot of practicing. So I practiced with my girlfriend. I practiced with one of my good buddies. And then I practiced at the actual event. I practiced with multiple of the supervisors. And then they gave me like what's it called? Basically like a Sherpa, like a talk Sherpa. So he walked me through the process of like, we're going to do your rehearsal here and do this. And so I had a couple practice videos that I sent back and forth with him prior to the event to really hone everything in. But yeah, like had to put a lot of work into it to get it to the point where, you know, it really connected because, you know, like you mentioned, like that feedback is invaluable. Getting feedback on what's working, what's not, what you can change, where the message can be refined. It wouldn't have been where it was at if it was the first time that I was delivering that talk. I'd probably delivered it, you know, maybe 20 times prior to that. So.
That's amazing. So I want to kind of take it back because I feel like we're talking about all of this success that you've had with TEDx. And I kind of want to take it back to Solana Beach, being raised by the cutest little Pakistani mama, the tallest of tall.
She's really cute, isn't she?
Red-headed man. Yeah, your mom is adorable, and your dad is the sweetest, kindest redheaded man. And I just want to hear from you about your upbringing and how what it was like to grow up in your household and kind of your background.
Oh man, what part of it? There was a lot there.
But juicy stuff. Anything? Yeah.
You're gonna have to be more specific because there were some big roller coasters in that upbringing.
I know some of your roller coasters. I don't know, maybe just your experience. I know that you had some adversity that you faced. I know there was some stuff that happened with ROTC and lessons that you learned, different experiences. I guess let's get to a point from how you got from your upbringing and maybe some cute little tidbits there up until you started working for the tech company that you were working.
Yeah, no, that's actually perfect. So we're going to take it all the way back to second grade. So in second grade, it's interesting because Jessica, you've known me for a while. Like, would you call me slow or dumb in any way?
No, Zander, I don't think that you would have been a slow child.
Yeah. So, just to kind of go back to second grade, most people don't know this about me, but when I was in second grade, I was actually the slow kid. So I actually did an IQ test and I actually had a below average IQ and they were going to hold me back in second grade for being slow. And Jessica, you know my mom. So, of course she's just like, oh, he's cute. He'll get by in life fine. Like, I don't mind. But I still remember this as being one of the key shifts in my life. And I didn't realize it until more recently when I had really done a lot of self-development and understood where some of my shifts in life really came from. But my second grade teacher actually told me, when my mom was kind of okay with me being slow, my second grade teacher actually told me, Zander, if you want to be smart, you have to work really, really hard for it. Do you want to be smart? And I said, yes. And I remember that moment that, my second grade teacher, Linda LaGrange, had taught me essentially, if you guys have ever read the book Mindsets by Carol Dweck, she essentially taught me to live in the growth mindset. A mindset where no matter what level I was at in any skill set or any area of my life, I could grow and become better at it. And in second grade, I ended up I remember working my ass off in second grade to make sure that I would pass second grade. And I did. And then I passed third grade and I passed fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade. And by the time I went to middle school, I had to go to the high school to take math. By the time I got to high school, I was actually going to the local university to take math. And so there was a very key point in my upbringing at 7 years old where one of, basically my teacher, one of my early mentors, taught me that your level of intelligence or your level and ability in anything was never set in stone. Whatever it was that you wanted or needed to learn, you could learn if you were willing to do the work. And so that was one of the biggest shifts earlier on in my life that actually created probably the biggest difference in everything and in my career up to that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so key that you had a great teacher and a great mentor that gave you that little hit because I feel like we have those people throughout our lives, and sometimes we don't realize who they are until we do that reflection. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it was literally just that singular moment for me that completely we talked about decisions, right? I made the decision that even though it was going to be hard work, I wanted to be smart and I was going to put in the time. And that decision for me kind of altered everything. So obviously went all the way through high school, did really good in math. So the proverbial question, what are you going to do with your life? Was pretty straightforward for me. It's like, oh, he's good at math. He's good at sciences. He should probably go into engineering, right? So I went to UCLA for electrical engineering. And while at UCLA, I was paying for my own tuition. So I actually joined Air Force ROTC to help pay for my tuition. And that was kind of the first time that I ever had my first run around with, what I call purpose, right? It was while I was in Air Force ROTC that I was, I really found something that I loved. I was leading and mentoring others. I had purpose. I had mission in my life. And that was really the first time that I had really found that passion in my life. So I was set to, I really accelerated at that. I was set to become a pilot in the Air Force. And then my senior year at UCLA, I actually made a really dumb decision and decided to drive home after having a couple of beers with some buddies, and I got a DUI. So my senior year in college, I had the next 20 years of my life planned out. And my senior year in college, I got that DUI and I was kicked out of the Air Force, and I was broken. I had lost everything that I thought was my purpose, my meaning in my life. And that was one of the hardest moments that I've ever had to go through.
You said that was the hardest thing that you'd ever had to go through. My first question is, what happened afterwards? And my second question, because we keep talking about purpose, and that's really what the TED Talk was about, and seems like is like a main theme in your life, right? So how did you realize that you weren't living a purposeful life?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I think kind of what happened next will kind of really dictate that for you. But so basically, I was 22 years old at that point. I was a lost 22-year-old, so I did what every other lost 22-year-old would do, right? I joined the corporate world. I took all these skills that I had built up. I went and joined Cisco Systems, which is, by the way, it's a great company. In my opinion, I had one of the best jobs out of anybody that I knew right out of college. And so I joined Cisco. I was in the corporate world, and I was trying to take all this energy, all this passion, everything that I had learned, and applying it to this role, right? And I did that very well for about 5 years. So I accelerated in my career. By the time that I was done there, I was working with companies. I was working with companies like Disney, Facebook, NBC, Google, DirecTV, Sony, Verizon, Comcast. I had standing meetings with C-level executives in all these companies. As a kid in his mid-20s, I was making $250,000 a year. I was driving a BMW around Venice Beach. I had literally the life that all of my friends wanted.
And a Miata.
BMW and a Miata. But I literally had the life that everybody wanted, but for 5 years, I had never felt fulfilled. I had what everybody told me was success, but I actually never, ever felt it. And every time I would get a raise or a promotion, it would feel great for a second or a day. But then it was just like this hunger for more right afterwards, just a dull unsatisfaction. And basically what I realized while I was going through that process was, I realized that this wasn't it. And that's a really scary thing for someone to realize, because most people, we talk about purpose. Most people have trouble following purpose because they think that it needs to be this you need to have this epiphany moment where you're you're meditating in lotus posture, like levitating off the ground, and you have this vision of this exact thing that you have to do. And then it's like, oh, I must do this thing. It's like, that never fucking happens, right? Like, let's get over it. But for a lot of people, you get extreme clarity on what you shouldn't be doing. And for most people, they're afraid not to do it. And for me, that was the reason why I knew for at least 2 years, at least the last 2 years while I was in that job, that I needed to get out. I was just too scared. I was just too afraid. I knew that it wasn't for me. But because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, I stayed in that role. I stayed in that job to continue to go down that path. That's the easiest way to settle for a life that you never wanted. To continue to go down a certain path just because you don't know what else it is you want to do. And so I got really lucky because I had a mentor of mine, and this was mid 2016. I had a mentor of mine who was a 7-figure entrepreneur. And I was just having a conversation with him, and he basically just asked me, he's like, Zander, like, you have so many different skills. You could he's like, you could literally do whatever you want. Like, what would you do? And he goes, what would you do if you couldn't fail? And I was like, well, I would lead and mentor and coach people full time. I have no idea what that means or how to do that. I've never known anybody who's been able to do that, but that's what I do. And I was like, that's the one thing that's been missing in my life ever since the Air Force, is leading and coaching and mentoring people. Right. And he goes, great. Why aren't you doing that right now? I said, well, I've got this amazing career. I'm making great money. I'm on the fast track to become a director at Cisco. And I just had all these excuses. And he just goes, just because you have a path laid out in front of you, does that mean you should follow it? And just because you're good at something, does that mean you should do it? And I kind of sat with that, and I was like, yeah, I guess I get it. And he goes, Zander, do you know the difference between you and me? And I was just like, well, you make a shit ton more money than I do. But he goes, the difference between you and I is I'm actually living my dream. And ever since you got kicked out of the Air Force, you're just dreaming one. And he goes, one day you will realize that the one resource you can never get back is your time. And the moment that you realize that, you will stop making decisions from a place of fear and start making them from a place of purpose. And that was on a Saturday, and that conversation was lubricated by a little bit of tequila. Sunday, I literally could not stop thinking about that conversation. Monday morning, I went back to work, and I had my whole morning of booked conference calls. It was like my 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. sales call, my 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. team call, my 10 a.m. to whatever a.m. Disney call. And it was just like, after that first call, I was just like, I'm never going to get that hour back. Then after the second call, I'm never going to get that hour back. Then the third call, I'm never going to get that hour back. By the time it hit lunch, it was like, I'm never going to get my morning back. I literally picked up the phone and I called my manager and I was like, Frank, I'm done. And he just goes, what? Like, who gave you an offer? And I was just like, nobody. And he goes, what do you mean? What are you going to do? And I just go, I don't know, but I know that it's not this. And that was it. They counter-offered me. If I remember right, it was like 50% more to work 50% less. Because basically, I still have a screenshot of this, but they pointed out that I was like on their sales ranking board, on their sales ranks of it was 1,200 salespeople in that organization, of which I was not a salesperson. I was an engineer. I was ranked number 2. And I was by far the youngest in the top 50. And so they were just like, we can't let you leave. So my favorite part was my manager actually said, his exact words were, give me the list of demands. And so I took a week and I literally put together a list of demands. And I gave it to him. And when I gave him the list of demands, I remember giving him this list of demands and him going, I'm going to go take this, I'll take this to our director and I'll see what I can do. And I go, Frank, I don't want it. I put together this list to see what I could put together. But even after putting together the list, it was just like, it doesn't matter. Whatever you give me, it doesn't matter if you give me $1 million a year and I'm working 10 hours a week. At that point, I have put a price tag on my soul. And it just doesn't matter anymore. Whatever level that is, I'm acting from a place of fear and not purpose. And that was one of the most revealing decisions that I'd made in my life, because he literally was just like, we'll give you whatever the hell you want. And I still was just like, there's nothing you can give me.
What an inspiring story, especially for people who are maybe fearful of taking that leap and are maybe afraid to leave something that they feel isn't fulfilling them. So I want to shift here because I know after you left Cisco, you started doing some self-improvement and you started investing in yourself and you got involved with Jack Canfield. So I want to dive into that and also how that brought you into the process of writing your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had been a self-development junkie ever since the Air Force. So I'd been reading John Maxwell, Jack Canfield, Stephen Covey, all of those things. Like, Jessica, you and I used to talk about Dale Carnegie, right? Like, I'd been a self-development junkie for years. And, I think the one thing for me was like, when I quit my job, I was, like you just mentioned, I was very clear that this thing wasn't it. Other than that, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. But I did know that I wanted to help people. I wanted to serve others. I wanted to mentor, coach, whatever that meant. And one of my favorite authors was Jack Canfield, right? His books over everybody else has really connected with me. And so one of the first things that I did, was like 2 days after I quit my job, like 2 days after I officially left, right? I picked up my phone and I Googled Jack Canfield phone number. And I literally found his number and I called up his office. His director of operations answered and I talked to her for about 30 minutes. Basically, it was just like, she just goes, hello. And I just go, hey, my name's Zander. I just quit my job. Can I come hang out with you guys? That was my proposal. And apparently it worked, because I spent the next 20 minutes talking to her. Then I talked to their CEO. Then I talked to Jack for a little bit, and then ended up literally it was just next day flew out to Arizona to go spend a few weeks with them and their executive team, train with them, learn everything from them, and basically just clarify what the hell was going on in my head to figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life. And as I did that, it became very clear that again, it was the same thing that I'd mentioned to my mentor before. I wanted to coach and lead and mentor others. And I knew that I could do it. I knew that I had the skills to figure it out. I just had no idea how to build a business around it. So over the course of the next 3 months, I spent close to $35,000 on my own training and development to learn how to get my own clarity, develop the skills that I needed to actually get a business up and running. And I always say this, and a lot of people are like, well, yeah, Zander, you made $250,000 at Cisco. Of course you could spend 35 grand on all your training. And then my response is, well, yeah, I'm a millennial. What do you think I did with all that money while I was making it? I spent it. Every damn penny of it, right? So when I left my job, I had about 3 months of rent saved up. That's it. And I spent all of that within the first 30 days.
On girls' jeans and
on girls' jeans and on girls' jeans and gas for my BMW. No. But I spent all of that within the first 30 days. And then I maxed out 2 credit cards over the next 2 months. But the one thing that I knew, right, it was I think a lot of people are afraid to invest in themselves, because here's the big kicker, right? Why? Because you spent $100,000 on your student loans that got you a degree that gave you nothing. So you're like, in most people's minds, they believe that investing in their own personal development is a sunk cost. Well, yeah, because you made a bad investment. Sorry to tell you that, the university system is archaic and doesn't teach you how to do the things that you actually need to do to be a successful, happy, fulfilled person in life. That's why my company is called Shit You Don't Learn in College.
Yes,
But
and probably would have taught a millennial how to invest and keep their money and, make more money. And have it
right.
work for you.
And so, for me, it was like, if I spent $100,000 on my undergraduate education, which got me nowhere around what I actually wanted to do, why would I hesitate to spend 40 grand when I actually started to get some clarity and drive to live more purposefully, even if it was on credit cards, right? So I basically maxed out a couple of credit cards, but that was, within the first 3 months, I was bringing in no income, but the 4th month, I started to actually make money as a coach. I brought in $13K that 4th month. The next month I brought in $17K. Then it was $24K, then $32K, then $42K. Because I put in the work up front and I came from a place of purpose. The one thing that I realized was, again, the only resource I could never get back was my time. Money I could get back, but my time I could not. And I was done wasting it. So essentially, the willingness to get extremely uncomfortable and take, as Tony Robbins says, massive action, right, towards your goals, towards your dreams, towards your vision. The ability to do that just catapulted me forward within the first 6 months. And obviously with Jack, I was working very closely with Jack and had kept him and his team in the loop on everything that I was doing along the way. And as soon as they kind of caught wind of that, Jack was like, all right, we need to get you into this book, get your story heard, and was able, it's actually sitting over my shoulder right here if you guys can see it on video, but was able to co-author a book with Jack and some other people around mastering the art of success so that I could get my story of going from, stuck in a corporate job, no idea what I was doing, dipping myself into a massive amount of debt, but coming out the other side with this business and life that I could literally have only dreamed of.
And you named your company Shit You Don't Learn in College, which I love. And let me see your shirt.
I was going to ask you, that was going to be my next question. What the hell does your shirt say? Like,
I fucking love you.
I couldn't see the bottom and I was like, what is going on here?
I gotta get a picture of it.
Could have been anything. It could have been anything under there.
Yeah, I know. Yep. The whole time it's like, I'm like, what are you fucking? Tell me. I want to know. Like, what are you fucking?
This is not appropriate for an interview. Yeah. I fucking love you.
This isn't your usual podcast though.
Yeah. So this is,
we're not appropriate.
We actually give this shirt to every one of our clients that starts bringing in, starts bringing in sustainable, profitable income in their coaching businesses. Because one of the things we do now, our main program is actually to help coaches build 6-figure, multiple 6-figure, even 7-figure businesses from the ground up. So every time we work with someone and they start to get a coaching business up, they start to get their first handful of clients, we actually give them one of these shirts. So it's kind of our, our community, the I fucking love you, shit you don't learn in college community.
So Zander, is that the shit you don't learn in college community, or is that the high impact coaching, and how do those relate to each other?
Sure. So shit you don't learn in college is our bigger brand, which right now, in terms of like what we're actually tangibly putting out into the world, is pretty much nothing. It will be, it's kind of the bigger 5-10 year vision. Really the main reason behind shit you don't learn in college is my 5 to 10 year vision is I actually want to, trying to think of how to put this delicately, but reinvent the education system over the next 5 to 10 years, which I'm not going to tell you guys how we're going to do it, because then the education system will know what we're doing. So that's our big goal around that. It will be my next book when my next book comes out. Actually, it might be the third book when my third book comes out. It'll be my podcast when my podcast comes out eventually. But right now, the shit you don't learn in college community is really just the overarching family of everything that we're doing. High impact coaching has been our major focus over the last couple of years. Because basically what happened was I was able to, the cliche, like, hey, I quit my job and started a life coaching business, right? Well, 99% of people that try to do that just fail miserably. And so the reason behind high impact coaching was I was able to turn up a multiple six-figure business in a very short amount of time. So at that point I had networked with a lot of other coaches that wanted to build businesses, but they'd been like, we've been trying to do that for like 3 to 5 years. How did you just do it in 3 months? Right. And so I actually started working with other coaches, and they were just like, you need to teach us how you just did that. So we started to work with other coaches. We started to teach more people, ipso facto, it kind of grew organically very, very quickly just because we saw such good results with everybody. So the high impact coaching community, one of the things that we noticed was, if we wanted to shake the foundation of the education system and the way that this world operates, coaches, if you think about it, are at the very tip of the spear. Entrepreneurs are the spearhead, but at the very, very tip are coaches, because they are the most influential and they are the most outspoken of everybody. So if we could help coaches, right? Since according to Glassdoor, 95% of coaches will never be able to make it full time. 95% of coaches will never be able to make it full time because none of them have any idea how to do it. If we could help those 95% to actually turn it into a full-time business, to be able to impact dozens, hundreds, or thousands of people from there, why not focus on the people that are at the very tip of the spear that are going to have the biggest impact? Because that one coach that wasn't going to succeed before, that I am now helping them turn this into a full-time business. And for the rest of their life, they're going to be able to go help thousands of people. And each of those thousands of people is now going to pay it forward and help thousands more. Each one of those individual coaches that I help is now going to drastically change the way that this world sees the world.
95% of coaches are not going to make it full time, according to Glassdoor, right? So
yep.
What's your take on that, right? Because there's this whole talk and I hear so much of this. It's oversaturated. It's oversaturated in any market you look into. You talk to any person who has that belief, is like, it's oversaturated, right? So what do you think that is? Like, what's your opinion on that, on why people say that?
So in my opinion, it's not oversaturated. It's oversaturated with people that have no idea what the fuck they're doing, is what it is. Right. So what we've noticed is the large majority of coaches have a gift and have an expertise that they have spent, maybe it's a few months, maybe it's a few years, maybe it's a few decades, thousands of dollars getting certifications, thousands of dollars getting degrees. Maybe they're nutrition coaches, right? Or naturopaths, right? Like, I don't know this, but a naturopathic doctor, right? The average naturopathic doctor spends somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 on getting their degree, and they don't make more than $60,000 to $70,000 a year. 70% of them are out of the field within 5 years because they cannot afford to pay off their student loans. Right? And that's one example. You look at life coaches or transformational coaches or spiritual coaches, all these different coaches, the large majority of them have to work 9 to 5 jobs or side jobs. I always joke about this with my clients, right? It's like, do you guys know the difference between an Uber driver and a life coach? The Uber driver actually gets paid to give advice. So most life coaches don't know how to actually get paid. They don't know anything around the business. They think that it's just about giving advice to people and that people would pay them. And to be honest, the large majority of people who want to go down the coaching path, they do it for the wrong reasons also. And they think that it's going to be easy. And then when they realize it's not, they complain about it and they give up on it. And so inevitably, it's a group of people that want to help, but they're not willing to put in the work, and they have no idea what it actually takes to build a coaching business. Because of that, what this world is oversaturated with, it's oversaturated with a bunch of people that are not actually committed to making it happen and making a difference. But as soon as you make a choice that like it's this or nothing else, and you realize that you could have the best product in the world, right? I always tell this to people. There's two ways to have no impact, right? If you're a coach, what's your real desire? Your real desire is to have a big impact, right? As a coach. But there's two ways to have no impact. Number one, you could be great at marketing and sales and promotion, but have a really shit product, right? Or a shit service. So you're basically selling snake oil. You get to a bunch of people, but it's a crap product, so you have no impact. That's number one. Number two is you could have the best service or product in the world, and you could have a desire to get it to everybody, but you don't learn how to market, promote, and sell. And therefore, you don't get that product to anybody. You too have no impact. And that's what most coaches don't realize is they always talk about getting out of their comfort zone. Like, oh, you need to get out of your comfort zones. But then they won't get out of their comfort zone to learn how to market or promote or sell. And therefore, they don't ever reach anybody. This is the biggest bone that I have to pick with coaches is like they say they want to have an impact. They tell everybody else to get out of their comfort zones and make purposeful decisions. Yet when it comes to actually doing it, a lot harder than they thought. So they give up.
Yeah, I think too, there's this persona that I think coaches feel that they have to portray, especially on social media. And I think that there's this weird stigma that if you see somebody and you're like, oh my gosh, that person has 100,000 followers, they must be making a ton of money, versus the person that has like 1,000 followers. But in reality, it could be the exact opposite. That person with 1,000 followers could be making, millions of dollars, and you have no idea. Yep.
It's so funny to me because like you bring that up, but like we made, I think I talked about that first like 13K month. That was with a Facebook group of 47 and an Instagram of 300. Right? Yet there were these quote unquote influencers out there with thousands and tens of thousands of people that were not actually having any impact. It was all for show. So yeah, I completely agree.
I talk to Jess about this all the time. I'm like, it's so deceiving. I mean, you never know. Like I know people that have 300 followers, like what you said, and they're millionaires. Like they're extremely what you see, never take it at face value. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, like most of the clients that we work with have under 1,000 followers and they're bringing in 15, 20, 30K a month. But people would never know because they don't have a little blue check mark next to their name.
Well, I love what you said about people, about like commitment and like committing, because that all just comes back to making a decision. When you don't commit, what that means is that you haven't actually made the decision that you're all in. Because when you make a decision and you commit, right? When you make a decision, you're committed. So, and you know how you say like a lot of coaches don't really walk their talk, right? So they'll tell you to get out of your comfort zone, and they're not doing it themselves, because I think that there's this idea of, this goes back to, when I want to talk about the woo-woo stuff, because law of attraction works, yes, but it's not going to work with you sitting on your ass at home doing nothing.
Yeah. We always, because in my program, we always talk about like the balance, right? It's the balance between like, the quantifying for us is like, on one side, you have like the total hippie that like sits and like meditates on the law of attraction, hoping that $1 million is going to fall into their lap. And then on the other side, you have like the full blown Gary V, where this person's just running around with their head cut off. Right. And it's like, you have to find the balance between the two. Right. Like you don't want to go like full hippie and you don't want to go full Gary V. Neither of them are going to be successful. You want to find hippie Gary V, somewhere in the middle.
Well, one of the things that I say about Gary V, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there too, and coaches that use Gary V as an example, and they say things, I hear this on the internet, they say things like, you don't deserve it, or you haven't earned it, or you're not working hard enough. And I'm like, why? You're looking at somebody who's living his truth. This is who he is. He has the energy, he has the capacity. This is his passion, this is his purpose, this is his drive, which is why he has the ability to function the way that he does. You can't compare yourself to someone like that. You may not be able to work 16 hours, 18 hours a day like he does. You may only be able to put in 7 to 8 hours, and that doesn't mean that you're not doing anything, you know? And then there's also the spiritual community where it's like, oh, I can't charge for my services because, you know, it's spiritual. And it's like, what? No, 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 no. You must. Like, you're undervaluing yourself. You're showing that you're not worthy. Anyways, I can go on a whole rant.
We have spiritual coaches that are charging $8,000 per client. Sorry. One of our clients charges 8888 because it's angel numbers.
I love that number.
There you go.
Because it means harmony and it means wealth and abundance.
Yep.
It just resonates.
So I feel you.
Zander, what are the top three pieces of advice that you would give to new entrepreneurs without giving away your secret sauce, and maybe just inviting people to want to be a part of some of your programs? What would be like the top three things that you would say that people would need to focus on?
Yeah. Let me think about that. I think number one would be, if you're a starting entrepreneur, right? I think number one would have to be, like we just talked about, Svetlana, like it's making the decision and the commitment, right? And this kind of goes back to what I mentioned before. And, you know, Jessica, kind of what you talked about, right? It's like when I made a decision to leave my job, they literally waved a golden ticket in front of me and were like, come on, just grab it. But because I was committed, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter what they gave me. I also remember my third month when I was just racking up debt and I was not bringing in any income at this point. I actually got a job offer from a Cisco partner. And because I had such high connections in all these different companies, they were going to give me a 6-figure salary just to put my name on their books and make introductions to the different companies that I knew people in. It would literally be a 5 to 10 hour a week job. And I had the contract in hand because at that point I was scared shitless about how I was going to pay rent the next month. I had the contract in hand and I was driving home and I remember just this like pit in my chest. And I asked myself, am I making this decision out of fear or out of purpose? And it was crystal clear that it was from fear. And so I told him no. That next month is when I started to bring in money as a coach. So number one, I'm not saying you need to quit your job right now. I actually highly suggest people don't do what I did because it's batshit crazy and it caused a lot of stress. But I will tell you, you have to mentally and emotionally commit fully. You cannot 99% it. 99% is 100% different than 100%. I want to let that sit for everybody. 99% is 100% different than 100%. It is not the same thing. So number one, you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision, number one. Number two, I would say, honestly, probably the biggest thing that really helped me was getting clarity, right? Get clear. So many people, like the hardest thing to do is take the first step. And when you're not clear, you don't know what direction to step. So it makes it even harder. Now, for me, right, that clarity could just simply be clarity in what you don't want to do so that you can step in a different direction and figure out if that's what you want to do and just start stepping and taking feedback quickly to figure it out. But I had clarity on what I didn't want to do so that I could make my commitment. I could make my decision. So work on getting clarity. This is something that like in our program, originally as a life coach, this is what my whole business was built around, you know, working with corporate professionals, helping them get clarity around their next step in their career, right? Because so many people, when they don't have clarity, they just stay trapped in a life that they never wanted. So clarity is definitely number two. Number three, and this is like, it's funny when I say this because everybody's always like, Zander, this is just a pitch for your program. And it kind of is. But at the same time, like I will tell everybody, invest in mentorship, coaching, whatever. Because the truth is, like, the way that I explain it, right? It's like, say you want to bake a cake and you've never baked a cake before, right? You don't have the ingredients to bake a cake. You don't have a recipe to bake a cake. So what do? Right? You go to Whole Foods, because we all eat organic now, right? So you go to Whole Foods, you buy all these ingredients, you mix them all up, you put them in the oven for, let's say, you know, like I did, 2 years, right? You pull it out of the oven and it's a big ball of mush. Why? Because you forgot the eggs. You didn't know you needed eggs because you never had a recipe and you never had anyone show you how to bake a cake. What's our most valuable resource? Time. Remember that, right? So most people spend years trying to bake a cake without a recipe, thinking that their most important resource is money. You are wrong. It's time. And when you realize that mentorship and coaching can time collapse you, then you realize the real value in investing in yourself. And so for me, that $35,000 that I spent over the course of those 3 months was by far the most important thing that I did in that process. And I'll be honest with you, right? It was terrifying, number one, because I put myself into a massive amount of debt and I did not know how I was going to get out of it. Number two, you think every one of those investments went the right way? No, they did not. There were several of those investments which were massive mistakes, but also probably the biggest and most important learning lessons in the process. There was one mentor that I invested in. I won't name his name. I spent $12,000 on his mentorship and it got me nothing. Not even like a little, like nothing. It was outdated information and there was terrible support that did not get me anything. But when people ask me, Zander, what's the one thing you would reinvest in if you were to go back and do it again? My answer is always the same. It's that 12K program.
I want to ask you really quick. I'm going to interrupt you. Would you say that when you invested into that mentor, were you making a decision out of fear?
No, I was not.
No?
It was out of purpose.
Mm.
But here's what came from it, right? I was being decisive. I was making purposeful investments. It was just a wrong investment. But there's a reason. Well, a wrong investment at the time, right? But I look back on it now and I learned two of the most important lessons of my life from that situation. Number one, I learned who I do not want to be as a coach. There is no other way that you can learn that lesson that hard. By putting yourself into a massive amount of credit card debt and getting nothing from it. There's no other way. That allowed me to become the coach that I needed to become to build a 7-figure coaching business. The second lesson that I learned from that was after I made that mistake, the fear that I had to go invest in myself again was crippling. Because I had already maxed out one credit card and I was already building on another. How could I keep investing? I wasn't making any money. The fear level just increased exponentially from that. But I gave myself the opportunity to face an even greater amount of fear and still choose purpose. And because of that, everything else ended up working out because I was truly proving to myself that I was committed. So, the third thing that I say for absolutely everybody, if this is something that you really want to do, you have to find mentorship. You have to invest. I've never met a successful entrepreneur or a successful coach that has done it on their own. I haven't met one. I've been in this industry a long time now. We've worked with hundreds of coaches. I've networked with thousands of coaches. I have not met one that's been successful without help. So if you're serious about it, get help.
I think that's with every industry too.
Absolutely.
For people that aren't coaches, I mean, everyone can potentially have a coach, and it doesn't just have to be for if you want to be an entrepreneur. It could be for anything. So we're getting close to an hour. I want to respect your time. I have one more serious question for you, and then I have some funny, silly questions that we just want to add in to have some fun. make everyone laugh. Our podcast is called Bold and Vulnerable. So we've been talking a lot about the bold decisions that you've made in your life. I want to get into a piece of vulnerability that has touched your life. And it doesn't have to be within the past year. It can be throughout your life, but maybe when you've felt the most vulnerable, or what piece of vulnerability inside yourself has catapulted you into who you are today.
Yeah,
like you're
absolutely.
literally naked, vulnerable.
This is actually a really, really easy one for me. So there's a drawing that sits over my desks in my living room, and I'll explain what it says in just a second, but it's to remind me of this every single day. A little over 2 years ago, this is about 6 months after I started my business, like you heard, started to see some very drastic success very quickly. And 6 months in, my best friend actually killed himself. And this was a buddy of mine that I had known since I was 10 years old. We, played soccer, played baseball together. We grew up like playing army in the backyard together. He introduced me to my first girlfriend. He joined the Marines. I joined the Air Force. Literally was like a brother to me. When I wasn't at my house, I was at his house. When he wasn't at his house, he was at my house. And he suffered from depression and PTSD. And 2 years ago, almost to the day, 2 years and 1 week, 1.5 weeks ago, he took his own life. And as a coach, as somebody who had worked with other people through PTSD, who had worked with people through depression and anxiety and suicidal tendencies, I couldn't help AJ. Couldn't help my best friend stay alive. And that was devastating to me. After that happened, it got sent into a really dark place, a deep depression that I literally didn't know if I would ever get out of. Because how could I help anybody if I couldn't help AJ? And I created this belief that I was not good enough for anybody. And, there's a lot of different things that I had to do to pull myself out of it. There's a lot of practices that we teach to help people overcome these types of limiting beliefs, overcome your negative thoughts that are preventing you from doing the things that you need to do. But I look back over the last 2 years, and then I'll tell you what the drawing is up above my desk. I look back over the last 2 years, and I can actually be grateful for everything that AJ was in my life and everything that he is in his death. Because he reminds me, and this was something that I mentioned earlier, he reminds me that this is not about me. It never was, and it never will be. So the sketch that sits over my desk is, I got to spend his birthday with his mom, and she found his sketchbook in his apartment from after he took his life, or before he took his life. And one of the top pages in charcoal writing just says, "Someone please give me a hand." And nobody else knew besides him that he wanted somebody to give them a hand. And I have that sketch, and I have it sitting over my desk every day to remind me that I will not let anyone else not know that they need a hand. That was his gift that he gave me, was to realize that there are thousands of other people out there that just want help, but they're too afraid to ask. I might not have been able to save him, but I am not going to let a single other person slip through my grasp.
Oh, man. I appreciate you sharing that.
Of course.
Thank you.
I really do. And I know that you went through that, and I saw you going through that, but we haven't really talked about it, so I appreciate you sharing that.
Of course.
Yeah. Thank you.
For
Let's
sure.
dedicate this podcast to your friend
Thank
in
you.
honor of AJ.
That. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I know I wanted to go from vulnerable to silly. I don't know if I'll do that again.
We can go straight to silly. I'm a silly guy. AJ would love it. AJ would love it.
I'm like, oh my
AJ
God,
would love
I'm having
it.
a
He would
heart
have it
attack.
no other way.
For AJ, we're gonna go right to silly. No, I just had some before we jump off with you. I had some just silly questions that maybe some of the listeners might want to know. So just
Sure.
a kind of typical morning routine for you. How do you start your day? What do you eat for breakfast? How do you get into Zander mode?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a very extensive morning routine that most people pay thousands of dollars to know about. But the gist of it is like it's very intentional, because one of the things that I tell everybody is like, especially like how you start your day can dictate how you do the rest of your day, right? One of the things I tell people, even something as simple as like hitting snooze on the alarm, literally, like we talked about commitment, right? When you break your first commitment, when you hit snooze on that alarm, you literally ruin yourself for all other commitments during the day. So, I'm very intentional on getting up for my alarm, no matter when it is. The first couple of things that I do, I'll always do some breath work. I'll always do a little bit of yoga to warm up the body, and I'll get right into like meditation and visualization. Right after that, depending on the day, right after that, I normally get into what I call, this is from Gary Keller's The One Thing. It's my one thing for the day, right? So it's like, if this is the only thing that I accomplish for the day, I normally set aside 90 minutes for it. If this is the only thing that I accomplish during that day, my day would be considered successful. So I go through my one thing. I do some planning and some prep work. Then I have my team call. So I do a daily team sync with my sales team every single day. And then directly after that, I head straight to the gym so that I can get all the morning energy and angst out. Does that help?
Yes, that is perfect. And just another fun one here. What is something silly that you have spent entirely too much money on?
Oh man. I would probably just, maybe it's not just one thing, but it's Amazon. I am so incredibly addicted to Amazon. It's not even funny. I joke about this because like Jeff Bezos has literally just has like a direct line straight into my brain. He's incredibly good at understanding human psychology, but like, I couldn't tell you how much money I've spent on stupid shit. I remember by the way, this is a great challenge for anybody. Ask 5 of your friends, like in like a group text message, to basically send screenshots of the last 5 things that they bought on Amazon. Like, it is one of my most entertaining things to do. The last time that I did this, it was like, and these are like really weird things. It was like a tutu, a squatty potty, some Epsom salt, and like something else like really weird. Like, but it's always the most interesting shit. But I couldn't tell you how much money I've spent on Amazon in the last year. So that would definitely be that one.
So speaking of Jeff Bezos, if he gifted you $1 billion to solve or conquer one world problem that you think would benefit the human race, what would you do with Jeff Bezos' money?
I would actually do exactly what I'm doing right now. In my opinion, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the TED Talk. In my opinion, if just 1% of this world actually truthfully started to live from a place of purpose rather than fear, like truly, like we were talking about, fully committed to living from purpose rather than fear, we would actually probably solve all of the world's problems. So I would take that money and I would put it towards the exact endeavor that I'm going for right now.
Well, we'll have to do another episode. We don't typically get super political on here, but diving into the education system, oh my God, we could probably talk
that could be like, yeah, that could be like hours itself. When you were talking about wasting money on college, I'm like, oh man, What did that degree get me?
This has been my life for the last 2.5 years. So you don't want to open up that box if you don't have time.
I love what you're doing. I think a lot of, and again, we don't typically get very political on here, but I think a lot of what's happening in politics is people want to either throw money at salaries or throw money at the education system, but they don't want to change the actual system, and they don't want to change the challenges and some of the corruption behind the system. So I think what you're doing is amazing. I don't know what you've got up your sleeve, but if you need investors, I believe in you. So let me know. And thank you so much keep me posted. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah. Any last words for the listeners before we get into where they could find you?
Yeah, actually, one last piece of advice. I think, obviously everybody who follows you guys and everybody who listens to this podcast, in my opinion, if you're listening to this podcast, you are the conscious few, right? But here's one thing that I want everybody to make sure that they understand. And this is actually something that Tony Robbins says. He says, knowledge is not power, right? Executed knowledge or implemented knowledge is power. I would actually take it one step further, right? These podcasts and everything like that are great information, but I wouldn't just say that knowledge is not power. I would actually say knowledge is actually the mortal enemy of impact. It's like a just-in-case information gathering mode rather than a just-in-time information gathering mode. You should actually constantly be in execution and implementation and find the information only when you need it. So get right into action and implementation mode and stop learning and start executing.
Thank you.
I love that advice because I believe that was what bogged me down for probably about a year before I executed on what I needed to do. I wanted to go to every seminar. I wanted to read every single book. I wanted to listen to every TED Talk. And it was, I had a mentor that I was working with, and she's like, "What are your goals?" I'm like, "I'm going to watch 100 TED Talks in this week," like freaking freaking out. It's like TMI, I took a speed reading class, and I started reading books like a maniac, and it was a little bit too much. And I think that I really learned to slow down. So I appreciate that advice, because I think that taking a step back and actually taking more action than just filling your brain with materials is the best advice I could have heard during that time. Well, thanks, Zander, for coming on. Where can people find you? Where should we direct people to you? And what can we link in the show notes?
Sure. If they want to learn more about me, feel free to just go to zanderfryer.com. You can follow me on Instagram or on Facebook at Zander Fryer. If you're interested in high impact coaching, you can go to high impact coaching as well. If you guys want to check out the TED Talk, you can go to zanderfryer.com/TEDx. But yeah, feel free, if anybody wants to just shoot me a DM, ask me any questions, I'm an open book. So happy to help however I can.
Thank you for listening to the Bold and Vulnerable podcast. For more information on today's speaker, please visit us at boldandvulnerablepodcast.com.
And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Let's keep spreading the love by being bold and vulnerable. Thank you. We love you.